The story begins on the edge of a dying town called Black Hollow, a place so quiet that even the wind seemed to move with hesitation. By day, the streets were dust and memory. By night, the moonlight turned the old saloon windows into silver eyes that watched without blinking. It was the kind of town that kept secrets buried deep, where everyone knew each other's names but nobody dared to speak of the past. And one man, Jesse Cain, was the ghost that haunted it. They called him an outlaw, but the truth about Jesse Cain was something far more complicated. By the time the sheriff rode in, Jesse had already vanished overnight. No one saw him leave. No tracks, no sign, nothing. Just an empty room, a silent horse, and a riddle carved into the walls of Black Hollow. The last person who saw Jesse alive was an innkeeper named Clara Webb. She swore he came in just before sundown, hat low, coat torn, a dusted revolver hanging at his hip. He didn't speak much, paid in gold, asked for a room upstairs, far end of the hall, the one facing the ridge. Clara said he seemed calm, but there was something in his eyes she couldn't place, like he was running from something that wasn't behind him yet. He sat at the table in the corner, ordered stew, and when she brought it out, he was just sitting there, staring out the window like he was listening to something only he could hear. She asked if he'd be staying long. He smiled once faintly and said, "Just till the night's over." Then he went upstairs, and that was the last she ever saw of him. Now the thing about Jesse Cain was, he wasn't new to vanishing. He'd been doing it for years. He was a thief to some, a hero to others. Stagecoach robberies, mine payroll holdups, mysterious letters left behind, always signed with that same strange mark, a spiral inside a circle. People said it meant something, that he was part of a secret ring of men who stole from the crooked and gave to the desperate. But others said he was nothing more than a killer with a clever tongue. Still, one thing was certain. Every time the law got close, Jesse disappeared, leaving behind nothing but rumor and dust. Sheriff Elias Harrow had been chasing him for almost a year. Harrow wasn't a man of patience, but he was a man of purpose. Hard lines on his face, eyes like steel, and a voice that didn't need to shout to command a room. He'd lost men hunting Jesse before, good men. So when he heard word that the outlaw had been seen in Black Hollow, he rode out before dawn with 2 deputies, Ross and Ayers, determined to bring Cain back dead or alive. The sun hadn't even touched the church steeple when they arrived. But Jesse was already gone. The inn was quiet. The door still creaked when Harrow pushed it open. The smell of wood smoke lingered, and somewhere a kettle still hissed. Clara was behind the counter, hands shaking, eyes wide. "He's gone," she said before Harrow even asked. "He was here. I swear it. But he's gone." Harrow moved past her, boots heavy on the floorboards, up the narrow stairs that led to the last room at the end of the hall. The door was shut, but the key was still in the lock. Inside, the air was cold. The window open, curtains moving slow in the breeze, the bed untouched. A chair tipped over as if someone had left in a hurry or been taken. On the floor near the desk was a single silver coin, foreign mint, something you wouldn't find around here. Harrow pocketed it, looked around once more, then noticed something strange on the wall near the window. A faint carving just deep enough to catch light. A circle. And inside it, that same spiral. That mark changed everything. Harrow turned, looked at the floorboards, the walls, the windowsill. He knelt, pressed his fingers to the wood. Dust disturbed, but no tracks leading out. The window opened onto nothing but air. 2 stories above the ground, no balcony, no ladder, not even footprints in the dirt below. The outlaw had vanished, and the sheriff knew that kind of disappearance didn't happen by accident. He closed the window, turned to Clara, and asked when she'd last heard anything from the room. "Sometime after midnight," she said. There was a sound, soft, like whispering. Then nothing. Harrow nodded, said nothing, and told her to lock her doors that night. By noon, the town was buzzing with stories. Some said Jesse Cain had been taken by spirits. Others claimed he had slipped through the old mining tunnels beneath Black Hollow, tunnels that hadn't been touched in 20 years. A few swore they'd seen a light up by the ridge, blue, flickering, like lanterns moving through fog. Harrow didn't believe in ghosts, but he knew fear made people see what they needed to. Still, there was something about this disappearance that made even him uneasy. He called his deputies and ordered a search. They combed the town, the ridge, the old shafts west of the creek. Nothing. No sign of struggle. No horses missing. But then Deputy Ross found something behind the stable. a torn piece of cloth half buried in mud. Dark blue with a stitched spiral symbol near the edge. Harrow took it, turned it in his hand. "He's leaving me breadcrumbs," he said quietly. "He wants me to follow." That night, Harrow couldn't sleep. He sat in his office, staring at the ledger, turning the silver coin between his fingers. On one side, the face of a king. On the other, 3 small letters, SRV. He'd seen that mark once before, years ago, in a file about smuggled currency from a foreign mining syndicate known as the Raven Company. A group of financiers accused of buying up land, evicting families, stealing mineral rights under false deeds. Jesse Cain had robbed one of their stagecoaches the year prior. Everyone thought it was just a heist, but maybe there was more to it. Maybe that was why he'd come back. Maybe that was the secret the outlaw had been hiding. The next morning, Harrow rode to the outskirts where the old mine entrances lay. The place was dead quiet. Timber supports rotted, rail lines rusted, the scent of earth thick and damp. He dismounted, lantern in hand, and stepped inside. The air was heavy. Every sound echoed like a whisper. About 50 yards in, he found fresh footprints. 2 sets, one larger, one smaller. Someone had been there recently. He followed them deeper until they stopped at a wooden door, half buried in stone, marked again with that spiral. Harrow pushed it open slowly. Inside was a small chamber. Rough walls, a lantern hanging from a nail. On the ground, a bedroll, empty food tins, and on the wall, maps, dozens of them. Old mining routes, survey notes, coded symbols. In the center, pinned with a knife, was a letter. It read, "For Harrow. You're closer than you think." Harrow stood still. For a long time, he didn't move. He read the words again, slower this time, and realized Jesse had known he'd come. This wasn't an escape. It was a trail, a game. The sheriff folded the note, slipped it into his coat, and turned back. But as he stepped out of the chamber, he heard something faint. A scrape of metal, the echo of movement down the shaft. He raised his revolver. "Cain!" he shouted. The echo came back empty, only his own voice answering him. He waited a moment longer, heart hammering, before stepping outside into the sunlight again. Back in town, the people stared at him like he'd been somewhere haunted. He didn't tell them what he'd found, not yet. Not until he understood. That night, he sat by the window of his office, staring at the horizon. The silver coin still in his hand. It caught the moonlight, gleaming faintly. And for just a second, he thought he saw movement on the ridge. A figure cloaked, watching him. Then it was gone. The sheriff knew then that Jesse Cain wasn't just hiding. He was planning something. The spiral wasn't just a mark. It was a map. And whatever secret Jesse was guarding, it was buried somewhere beneath Black Hollow, waiting for the right man to dig it up. The morning after the sheriff found that hidden chamber, the sun rose dull and red over Black Hollow, like the world itself was holding its breath. Sheriff Harrow hadn't slept. The letter burned in his mind. "You're closer than you think." Closer to what? To Cain? To his secret? He didn't know. But one thing was certain. Jesse Cain wasn't running away. He was drawing the sheriff in like a spider pulling a fly deeper into the web. Harrow knew the pattern. Men like Jesse didn't vanish by mistake. They vanished by design. By noon, word had spread that the sheriff had found something underground. The townsfolk whispered in the saloon, in the streets, in the pews of the small church. Black Hollow had been dying for years. The mines dried up, the rail line rerouted, the people weary of promises that never came. But now, suddenly, there was life again. Curiosity. Fear. The outlaw's ghost hung in every sentence. Clara Webb, the innkeeper, came to the sheriff's office with trembling hands and said, "You won't believe what I found." She set down a folded piece of paper, yellowed and water-stained. It was tucked behind the drawer where he sat last night. I didn't notice it till this morning. Harrow unfolded it carefully. Inside was a crude sketch, a section of Black Hollow's mining network marked with red ink. Circles, arrows, numbers, and again, the spiral. Always the spiral. "Where did he get this?" Harrow asked. Clara shook her head. "I don't know, but he left it there on purpose, like he wanted you to find it." The sheriff stared at the page. He recognized one of the markings, a shaft number on the western ridge that had collapsed 10 years ago. It wasn't just any tunnel. It was the old Dryfen passage, sealed after a cave-in killed 12 miners. Nobody had gone near it since. The ground there was said to be cursed, but if Jesse Cain had marked it, there had to be a reason. That evening, Harrow saddled his horse again. He brought 2 deputies, Ross, young but sharp-eyed, and Ayres, older, steady as stone. They followed the map west out of town, across the ridgeline, through scattered pines. The wind cut sharp. As they climbed, the sheriff thought about Jesse's motives. He wasn't just an outlaw. He was leaving clues, orchestrating something larger. That meant the secret wasn't a stash of gold or a simple escape plan. It was information. Something buried, something that mattered enough to risk everything for. When they reached the old Dryfen shaft, the place looked dead. The mine entrance was half collapsed, timber beams splintered and gray, but Harrow could see where someone had recently moved earth. The dirt was fresh, the boards shifted. A narrow crawl space had been cleared just enough for a man to squeeze through. "He's been here," Harrow muttered. He handed the reins to Ross. "Tie the horses. We go in." The air inside was thick with dust. Their lanterns threw long, flickering shadows on jagged rock. The sound of dripping water echoed like whispers from another world. They moved slow, careful. Every few feet, Harrow stopped and listened. Nothing but the rasp of their own breath. But as they descended deeper, the tunnel widened and something began to change. The air grew colder, the walls smoother, as though someone had carved them recently. After 50 yards, they reached an opening, and there, carved into the stone above it, was that same mark again, the spiral, etched clean and deep. They stepped inside. The chamber was wide, unnatural like an underground vault. In the center stood a table made from old mine timbers. On it lay maps, notebooks, and candles burned low. Harrow lifted one of the books. It was a ledger filled with names, dates, and figures, mining claims, land titles, and beside each one, a mark. Seized. Others said returned. It took him a moment to realize what he was holding, and Jesse Cain had taken them. Every single one. Ross exhaled softly. "You think he was keeping score?" Harrow nodded slowly. More than that. He was collecting proof. He turned another page and found a note written in Cain's hand. "If you're reading this, Harrow, then you found what they buried. You found them." The sheriff frowned. "Them who?" he murmured. And then, faintly, from the far end of the chamber, came a sound, a shift of gravel, a footstep. Instinctively, Harrow drew his revolver, lantern trembling in his other hand. "Who's there?" The light caught a shadow, someone moving just beyond the reach of the glow. "Don't shoot, Sheriff." The voice came low, cautious. A man stepped out from behind a rock pillar, thin, unshaven, hollow eyes. It was Larkin, Jesse's right hand. "You shouldn't be here," he said, raising both hands. Harrow leveled the gun. "Where's Cain?" Larkin smiled, tired, bitter. "Gone, like smoke. You'll never catch him." "He's not gone," Harrow said coldly. "He left me a trail. He wants me to see something." Larkin's eyes narrowed. "Then you're already too deep. You think you're hunting him, Sheriff, but he's leading you where he wants you to go." Ross moved closer, hand hovering near his holster. "You hiding something here?" he asked. Larkin's gaze flicked toward the wall. "Everything you see, the maps, the books, none of it belongs to him. It's evidence. The men who run this town, the ones who own the mines, the bank, the land, they're the ones who stole from us. Jesse found proof. He wanted to give it back. But the people he was up against, they'll kill anyone who touches this." Harrow studied him. "Then why are you still here?" Larkin's expression cracked. "Because I didn't make it out in time." Before Harrow could respond, a sound thundered above, rock splitting, echoing. Dust rained from the ceiling. "Cave in!" Ayres shouted. They scrambled for the exit. The tunnel shook, boards snapping. Harrow grabbed the ledger and stuffed it into his coat as the light flickered. "Move!" he barked. Larkin stumbled, caught a beam, but Ross pulled him free. They burst out into the open air just as the entrance collapsed behind them, a roaring cloud of dust swallowing the tunnel whole. When the shaking stopped, the mine was sealed again, the underground vault buried once more. They stood there gasping, covered in dirt and sweat. The sheriff stared at the collapsed entrance, jaw tight. He did that on purpose, Harrow muttered. He wanted to hide it again. Ross coughed. Then why leave the maps? Why the notes? Harrow looked down at the ledger in his hand. Because he wants me to finish it. That night, back in town, Harrow sat in his office, lamplight casting long shadows across the desk. He opened the ledger again, flipping through names. One caught his eye. Havelock. Widow Havelock. She lived on the edge of Dryfen Gorge, an old woman who kept to herself. Harrow remembered her. Polite, quiet, always paid her taxes on time. But next to her name in the ledger was a mark. Safe house. He frowned. Safe house for what? He whispered. He looked at the next line. Delivery, Friday, gold to be secured. His pulse quickened. Friday was tomorrow. He stood, holstered his gun, and blew out the lamp. He didn't bother sleeping. When the dawn came, he was already on horseback, riding toward the gorge. The morning fog hung thick as cotton, curling through the trees. Birds scattered at the sound of his horse's hooves. The path wound narrow, the earth soft beneath the weight of memory. He reached the widow's cabin just as the first light hit the cliffs. Smoke rose gently from her chimney. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Harrow dismounted, approached the door, and knocked once. Mrs. Havelock, Sheriff Harrow, need a word. Silence. He knocked again. Harder. The door creaked open. The widow stood there, eyes wide, a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. Sheriff, she said softly, you're out early. He stepped inside, scanning the room. Tidy, simple, nothing unusual. You've had visitors, he said. She froze. No, she lied. He gestured to the corner, muddy boot prints on her floorboards. Then who's been walking in your house at night? The silence stretched thin. Then finally she sighed. He came 2 nights ago. Jesse. He said he needed to hide something. Said it was for the good of everyone. Her hands trembled as she spoke. I didn't want trouble. He promised he'd be gone before sunrise. Harrow's eyes flicked around the room. Where did he hide it? The widow hesitated, then moved to the hearth. She lifted one loose stone from the floor, revealing a hollow beneath. Inside was a small box, wooden, iron-bound, locked with that same spiral-shaped keyhole. She looked up at him. He said not to open it until the time was right. Harrow knelt, touched the box. It was heavy, humming with some quiet danger. He looked at the widow, then back at the keyhole, his voice low, steady. Well, he said, I reckon it's about that time. The box sat heavy in the sheriff's hands, the wood dark with age, the metal edges cold as riverstone. The spiral keyhole seemed almost alive, faintly glinting in the firelight. Sheriff Harrow turned it over, listening as something inside shifted softly, like papers brushing against metal. He didn't have the key, but he'd never let a lock stand between him and the truth. Step back, ma'am, he told Widow Havelock, and with one sharp strike from the butt of his revolver, the latch cracked open. The lid groaned as it lifted. Inside were 3 things: a bundle of letters tied with red string, a stack of small folded maps, and a single iron ring carved with that spiral insignia. Harrow picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. This, he muttered, wasn't meant for hiding. He untied the letters. The handwriting was Jesse Cain's, quick, slanted but deliberate. The first note was addressed simply to Elias Harrow, the sheriff's name. He read slowly, every word heavy with purpose. If you're reading this, then they've started watching you too. The ones who built Black Hollow didn't build it for the people, they built it for the gold that runs underneath it. The Raven Company was never about mining. It was about control. They took land from widows, from men who couldn't read the contracts they signed, from every soul who trusted the sheriff's seal. But the seal wasn't yours, Elias. It was theirs. Harrow's hand tightened. He kept reading. You were their law, but you didn't know it. They needed you to hunt me, to burn my name, to make sure no one ever believed I was trying to put the truth in the open. I wasn't stealing. I was taking back proof, the ledgers, the deeds, the letters they forged in the company's name. Everything's been buried in these hills. The last piece, the one they'd killed to protect, it's under the church. The foundation stone. Harrow looked up sharply. The church in Black Hollow, small, quiet, sitting right in the center of town like a grave marker. He'd walked past it every day for years. He could see it now in his mind, the stone altar, the floorboards old and warped. Beneath it all, the truth. He folded the letter, heart pounding. Mrs. Havelock, he said quietly. Did Jesse tell you what this was about? She shook her head. Only that it was dangerous. Said once the sheriff knew, everything would change. Harrow nodded once, slipped the letters and maps into his coat. It already has. He left before the sun rose higher. As he rode back toward town, the landscape seemed different, harsher, sharper, as though every rock and tree had been watching him all along. When he reached the edge of Black Hollow, he saw a figure waiting by the crossroads. It was Deputy Ross. He looked shaken. Sheriff, he said, you better come quick. They rode together in silence until they reached the church. The front door was open. Inside, the pews were empty, the air thick with the smell of oil and dust. What happened? Harrow asked. Ross swallowed hard. Someone broke in last night, tore up the floorboards near the altar, like they were looking for something. Harrow's blood ran cold. He pushed through the aisle, boots echoing. The altar was cracked, the stone foundation exposed, but something was missing. A hole had been dug out beneath it, deep enough to fit a small chest, and it was empty. He stood there for a long time, staring at that hole. Then he noticed something glinting at the bottom, a coin. The same foreign mint. The same spiral mark. Jesse's calling card. No, Harrow whispered. He beat me to it. Ross frowned. You think he took it? The sheriff shook his head slowly. No. He wanted me to know he found it first. He wanted me to see the hole. That evening, Harrow gathered what little he had, the ledger, the letters, the ring, and spread them out on his desk. Every clue, every mark led back to one name that kept repeating in Jesse's notes. Samuel R. Vail. The initials matched the coin, SRV, the founder of the Raven Company. But Vail wasn't supposed to be alive. The man had disappeared 5 years ago after an investigation into fraud and land theft collapsed. Yet, if Jesse was right, Vail had never left Black Hollow. He'd just changed his face and his name. As the lamplight flickered, Harrow's eyes drifted to the window. Outside, the streets were quiet. Too quiet. Then, from the shadows across the street, a figure stepped forward, tall, wearing a long coat, hat low. Harrow froze. The figure stood still for a moment, then turned and walked away into the dark. He was out the door in seconds, revolver drawn, boots hitting the dirt hard. Cain! He shouted. The echo rang through the empty street. No answer, just the faint creak of a door at the far end of the alley. Harrow followed the sound, pulse quickening. When he reached the corner, there was nothing, only an envelope tacked to the wall with a knife. He pulled it down. Inside was a single sheet of paper. If you want Vail, come alone, midnight, the Ridge. No signature. None was needed. When midnight came, the moon was a thin silver slice in a sky full of clouds. Harrow rode alone up the ridge path, the wind cutting through his coat. The land fell away beneath him, endless darkness, broken only by the faint glow of Black Hollow in the distance. At the top, the path opened to a flat clearing, and there, waiting, was Jesse Cain. He looked older now, worn down by dust and years, but his eyes still burned like they always had. Sharp, restless, alive. He stood with his hands raised, unarmed, a small fire burning between them. You found it, Jesse said. His voice was low, calm. Didn't take you long. Harrow dismounted slowly, gun still in hand. "You've been leading me in circles, Cain." The outlaw smiled faintly. "Not circles, spirals. Every step closer to the center." The sheriff stepped closer, the firelight flickering across both their faces. "What was in that church? What did you take?" Jesse didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded parchment, old, yellowed, sealed with wax. "This," he said, holding it up, "the original land charter of Black Hollow, signed by Vale himself. It proves everything. The fraud, the forged claims, the bribes to the old sheriffs before you. They buried it under the church to make sure no one ever found out." Harrow's jaw tightened. "So what now? You run again?" Jesse shook his head. "No, Sheriff. I'm done running. But Vale, he's still here, and he knows you're on his trail." Harrow lowered the gun slightly. "Where is he?" Jesse looked past him toward the town below. "He's been hiding in plain sight, the preacher." For a moment, Harrow didn't move. Then the realization hit like a gunshot. Reverend Cole, soft-spoken, kind, the man who'd come to Black Hollow 5 years ago, the same time Vale vanished, the same man who'd built that church from the ground up, the same church that hid the proof. Harrow's eyes narrowed. "You're saying the preacher is Vale?" Jesse nodded once. "And he'll kill anyone who can prove it." The wind picked up, scattering ashes from the fire. "I needed you to find the truth yourself," Jesse said. "If I told you, you wouldn't believe me. But now you've seen it. You've touched it. You know what this town really is." Harrow looked down at the ground, then back at him. "You could have turned it in. You could have brought this to justice." Jesse's smile was tired. "Justice," he said softly. "There's no justice in a place built on lies. There's only who's left standing when the smoke clears." Then from the darkness behind them came a sharp crack, the sound of a rifle. The bullet hit the dirt near Jesse's feet. Harrow spun, gun raised. From the tree line, 2 figures emerged, men in long coats, rifles in hand, hired guns. Jesse cursed, dove for cover. Harrow fired once, the flash lighting up the night. One of the men dropped, the other fled back into the shadows. When the smoke cleared, Jesse was crouched by the fire, clutching his shoulder. "Blood." "They found us," he hissed. Harrow knelt beside him. "We need to get you out of here." Jesse shook his head, voice ragged. "No time. You have to take it." He pressed the parchment into Harrow's hand. "Take it to the courthouse. Expose him. Don't let him bury it again." The sheriff looked down at the dying outlaw, the man he'd hunted for years, and for the first time, he saw not a criminal, but a man who'd spent his life trying to make things right the only way he knew how. "I'll finish it," Harrow said quietly. Jesse nodded once, a faint smile breaking through the pain. "I know you will." The fire crackled, wind howling through the ridge. And by the time Harrow looked up again, Jesse Cain was gone, vanished just like before. Only the spiral ring lay where he'd been. The sheriff rode down from the ridge before sunrise, the wind cutting through him like the weight of a confession. In his coat, the parchment rustled softly with every hoofbeat, the proof Jesse Cain had died for. Black Hollow lay quiet below, the first gray light of dawn brushing over rooftops and dirt streets. To anyone watching, it was just another morning. But to Sheriff Elias Harrow, everything had changed. He knew the truth now that the law he'd sworn to uphold had been twisted long before he wore the badge. That Reverend Cole, the man the town trusted, was Samuel R. Vale, the ghost behind the Raven Company's crimes. And that Jesse Cain, the outlaw everyone feared, had been the only one brave enough to drag that truth into the light. He stopped outside the church just as the bell tolled. The sound was slow, hollow, echoing across empty streets. The door stood open. Inside, the candles burned low. Reverend Cole stood at the altar, calm, composed, hands clasped like a man waiting for confession. "Morning, Sheriff," he said softly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Harrow stepped inside, boots echoing. "Maybe I have." His hand hovered near his gun. You've got a talent for hiding in plain sight, Reverend. Or should I say veil? The preacher didn't flinch. He simply smiled, slow and deliberate. So, Jesse told you? He didn't have to, Harrow said. I found the proof myself. The land charters, the ledgers, the forged claims. You stole this town piece by piece. And when he tried to stop you, you buried him in lies. Cole sighed, almost weary. You think you understand, Sheriff, but you don't. Men like me didn't build Black Hollow out of greed. We built it out of necessity. The mines dried up. The people starved. I did what I had to do to keep it alive. By stealing from them? Harrow's voice was cold. By keeping order, Cole replied. The kind of order that men like Jesse Cain threatened. He wanted chaos. He wanted to tear everything down. You of all people should know what happens when the law fails. I gave these people faith, a reason to stay. Harrow stared at him, disgusted. You gave them lies. He pulled the parchment from his coat and held it up. Your signature, your seal, your crimes, this ends now. Cole's eyes flicked to the document, and for the first time the calm slipped. You don't know what you're doing, he said, his voice hardening. If you turn that over, you won't just destroy me, you'll destroy the town. Everything built here will crumble. The land titles, the bank, the trade routes, they're all tied to my name. Without them, Black Hollow collapses. Harrow stepped closer, his face like stone. Maybe that's what it deserves. Cole's eyes darkened. You sound just like him. I reckon that's the best compliment I've ever had. The air grew heavy. Neither man moved. The only sound was the creak of the church rafters and the low whisper of the wind. Then Cole spoke again, quieter now, but colder. You think you're righteous, Sheriff. You think this will make you a hero. But you don't understand what kind of men you're crossing. I was never the top of the ladder. The Raven Company still exists. They still own half this territory. You expose me, they'll come for you next, and they won't miss. Harrow holstered his gun slowly. Let them come. Cole's expression shifted, not anger, not fear, but something like pity. You're a fool. Maybe, Harrow said, but I'm a fool with the truth. He turned to leave, but Cole's voice stopped him cold. You know, Cain said the same thing once. The preacher walked closer, the light catching his eyes, revealing something venomous beneath the calm. He thought he could play savior, thought he could steal my records and bring me down. So I let him. I let him run. And when he finally came for me, I made sure he'd disappear for good. Harrow froze. Slowly he turned back. You killed him. Cole's smile was faint, cruel. No, Sheriff, I didn't have to. The mines took him. All I did was close the entrance and let the earth do the rest. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Harrow stepped forward, eyes blazing. You buried him alive. Cole shrugged lightly. He made his choice. Harrow drew his revolver in one smooth motion. And so did I. Before Cole could react, the church doors slammed open. Deputy Ross burst in, rifle raised. Sheriff, he shouted. But in that instant, Cole moved fast, too fast for a preacher. His hand went to his coat, pulling a small pistol. A single shot cracked through the air. Glass shattered. The candles blew out. When the smoke cleared, Cole was on the ground, the pistol fallen beside him, blood seeping through his chest. Harrow stood over him, his revolver steady, the parchment clutched tight in his other hand. Ross lowered his rifle slowly. You all right, Sheriff? Harrow didn't answer. He just looked down at Cole, the man who poisoned an entire town under the name of God. Cole's breath came shallow. You think this changes anything? He rasped. They'll come for you, Elias. You and your badge will be dust before the truth ever sees daylight. Harrow knelt beside him, his voice low. Then I'll make sure there's nothing left for them to bury. Cole's eyes flickered once, then went still. By sunrise, the church was empty except for the sheriff and the dead. Harrow took the parchment, the letters, and the ledger, and rode straight to the courthouse in Ironwood, 2 towns over, the nearest seat of law not owned by the Raven Company. He filed every piece of evidence, every name, every signature. It took weeks for the news to spread, but when it did, Black Hollow was never the same again. The papers called it the Hollow Conspiracy. Investigations opened. Warrants were issued. Properties seized. Men who'd hidden behind false names fled the territory. For the first time in years, the people of Black Hollow could breathe without debt hanging over them. But they didn't thank the sheriff. They didn't even know what he'd done. The story they heard was simple. The preacher had fled town after accusations of fraud. Nothing more. Harrow didn't correct them. He didn't tell anyone about Jesse Cain. He didn't speak of the ridge or the box or the night the outlaw died. Some truths, he decided, didn't belong in courtrooms. They belonged to memory. One evening, months later, Clara Webb found him sitting outside the inn, staring at the horizon where the sun sank red behind the hills. "They say you saved the town," she said quietly. Harrow shook his head. "No, I just stopped letting it rot." She hesitated, then handed him something small. A ring. Iron, carved with a spiral. "Found it near the ridge last week," she said. "Figured it was yours." Harrow took it, turning it in his fingers. The metal was cold, smooth, familiar. "No," he said softly. "It's his." He stood, walked out past the edge of town where the land dropped off into a sea of dusk. The wind carried the smell of rain, the faint sound of thunder somewhere far away. He knelt, dug a small hole in the earth, and placed the ring inside. "You kept your word," he murmured. "Now I'll keep mine." When he rose, the sky had darkened. Lightning flashed over the ridge, and for just an instant he thought he saw a figure there, standing where the fire once burned, coat flapping in the wind, watching, waiting. Then the storm came down, hard and cold, washing the dust from the streets of Black Hollow. And by the time the rain stopped, the outlaw was gone again, vanished into legend, leaving behind nothing but a spiral carved into the sheriff's heart. Some say that on quiet nights when the wind moves just right across the ridge, you can still hear the sound of a horse's hooves fading into the dark, a ghost chasing justice through the hollow hills. But Sheriff Harrow knew better. Jesse Cain wasn't haunting the town. He'd become part of it, the whisper in the wind, the reason the guilty still looked over their shoulders. Because every man who had ever buried the truth knew one thing: some secret's done to stay buried. And in Black Hollow, the spiral always comes back around.